Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to A Cup of Hope with Hope Against Trafficking and the Michigan Abolitionist Project. Today's episode is called Sex Trafficking and the Hidden Wounds of Trauma. Sex trafficking and the hidden wounds of trauma is an extremely important topic, and we wanted to take a deeper look into the complexities of sex trafficking with behavioral health counselor Felicia Berry. She will be sharing about the types of trauma often experienced by survivors of sex trafficking, the hidden bonds that keep them enslaved to the life, and the informed and focused care required to help treat the debilitating PTSD that inevitably affects survivors once they've escaped the life. You will have the opportunity to submit questions to our panel by typing your questions into the Facebook Live event on either Hope Against Trafficking or Michigan Abolitionist Project's Facebook page, or through Hope Against Trafficking's YouTube page. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We'll collect these and address them during the session. Please welcome today's guest, Felicia Berry. She is a behavioral health therapist at Ascension Southeast Michigan Community Health. She is specifically with the Open Arms Division. Open Arms provides supportive services on behalf of victims of criminal acts. Felicia provides therapeutic interventions, resources, and support on behalf of women impacted by human trafficking, intimate partner violence, and sexual abuse. Felicia's 23-year career trajectory has focused exclusively on behalf of women, teens, and children impacted by mental, physical, emotional, verbal, sexual, psychological, spiritual, and financial abuse in a host of settings. These settings include hospitals, clinicals, schools, faith-based, residential, and community settings. Felicia was a member of the Ascension Southeast Michigan Human Trafficking Task Force, which developed and implemented a hospital protocol to identify victims of human trafficking. Felicia has been an adjunct professor in the Wayne State University School of Social Work and a continuing education instructor with Core Learning. Felicia is a member of the Haven Advisory Board and provides community service on behalf of cats and kittens at a local pet store. And today's hosts, I'm going to go ahead and put us on. Say hello, everyone. We have Emily Johnson, who's the program coordinator at Michigan Abolitionist Project, and I am Hannah McPeak with Hope Against Trafficking. So excited to be here. We're so glad that you can join us, Felicia. So we're gonna dive right in. Okay, I gotta get my notes up here. Okay, so let's get going. Emily, I know you have some experience with trauma, and I wondered if you could define trauma for us.
Yes, I would love to. So trauma is what happens to us when we've been exposed to an incident or a series of incidents or events that are emotionally disturbing or life-threatening and have lasting adverse effects on our functioning, as well as mental, physical, social, emotional, and or spiritual well-being. So there's a few different types of trauma. So it's considered acute trauma when there's just been one single incident. Chronic trauma is when there's been repeated and prolonged exposure, such as domestic violence or abuse. And complex trauma, which we're going to talk a lot about today, is exposure to varied and multiple traumatic events, often invasive and impersonal in nature. Just some types or examples of traumatic experiences, the range of different traumatic experiences that someone may have. It could be physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, childhood neglect, living with a family member with mental health or substance use disorders, witnessing or experiencing domestic violence, sudden separation from a loved one, especially in children, poverty, racism, discrimination, oppression, violence in the community, terrorism. These can all be considered traumatic events. And then, although, trauma can occur at any age, It affects everyone differently. It has particularly debilitating long-term effects on children's developing brains. So when trauma happens in the life of a child, it can be especially harmful to their development. And this is often referred to as adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs for short. Some of you may be familiar with that. Um, Actually, we've got Felicia here. I was hoping she could share with us a little bit more about ACEs. What are these adverse childhood experiences?
Ooh, Emily or Felicia, I think you're muted still.
There we are. Okay.
There you are.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the adverse childhood experiences. What that is a measuring tool to determine the amount of trauma and the onset of trauma on behalf of children under the ages of 18. There's a series of I've started out with this particular tool with 10 questions, but the one that I printed up is 21. There's no right or wrong amount, but what we want to gather is the impact of trauma, how long the trauma occurred, because again, as Emily said, trauma can travel across the lifespan. So as an assessment tool, when someone is coming in, and we'll talk about trauma-informed care a little later, this would be an excellent tool to measure the depth of trauma when someone is coming in for services, be it human trafficking, domestic violence, childhood sexual abuse, rape. So I'll just go over a couple of them. And did a parent or adult in the household very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you feel physically hurt? That would be one question. And then you'll answer yes or no. Did a parent or adult in the household often or very often grab, push, hit, slap, throw something at you, or hit you hard and leave marks, leaving you injured? And I'm going to skip down a little. Did an adult or a person at least 5 years older than you ever fondle, touch, or have you touch their body in any sexual way, or attempt to actually have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? Again, that's a very pertinent and relevant question for an individual who was the onset of sexual abuse and assault occurred in their childhood. Did you often, very often, feel no one in the house loved you or thought you were important or special, or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? Can you kind of see the ties here when we talk to individuals who have been trafficked or in abusive relationships? Oftentimes, as a therapist, these questions come up without the A score. This comes up: the onset, the history of dysfunction. And then, was a biological parents ever lost you in divorce, abandonment, or any reason? Did a parent or someone in the house go to jail? Was someone alcoholic? Was there alcoholic or substance abuse in the home? So with the A scores, and they are available on the internet, it kind of gives you a guide of where you're going to start the treatment. One of the questions prior to coming on the show was like, where do you start in the treatment process? Well, this would be an excellent tool to begin that process. Oftentimes, victims tell their stories over and over again. They tell it to the police, they tell it to the court, they tell it to the advocate. And here I am asking again. This kind of puts a little buffer between us where they don't have to talk it out, but they can kind of write it out. And then we can explore from there. Okay.
That's a really, really good point. Didn't think about that. That this is a great way to gather some really important information, but not having to ask them to retell and retell. But it's more like yes or no, so you can sort of get an idea of where we're starting from. What the baseline is. So
Yes.
that's a really good point.
I like that baseline. That's a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, I'm glad you went through some of the questions. At the assessment. It really goes through abuse, what kinds of abuse they've experienced, neglect, and then what kind of household challenges they've experienced. And actually, these adverse childhood experiences are not just specific to trafficking victims, although it is
Yes.
definitely more common. This spans across people all over the world, especially in the United States. Research shows that 62% of US adults have had at least one adult childhood experience. 5% of US adults experienced three or more. Um, Research also shows that the risk for ACEs is particularly elevated within certain populations, such as people who identify as Black, Hispanic,
Yeah.
multiracial, people less than high school education, people with low income, or who are unemployed or unable to work at some point, and people who also identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, are at an increased for adverse experiences.
So, we talk about adverse childhood experiences and some of these abuse histories and things like that. So, how does all of this sort of tie into human trafficking? Many survivors report that they've experienced traumatic experiences in their lives when they were younger, maybe in
Absolutely.
their homes or by different family members, around in their community. So oftentimes, people are experiencing low or poor self-image and
Mhm.
self-esteem as a result of the trauma. And unfortunately, what happens are traffickers, manipulators, exploiters, right,
Yes.
are looking for such vulnerabilities and identify them as targets to exploit. So it increases that exposure. And by targeting vulnerable populations, victims can then take ownership of the decisions being made and believe what's happening to them, and it's once a victim is initiated into the life, it becomes very difficult to get out. And so, Felicia, can you tell us about some of the types of traumatic experiences someone may endure once they've entered into the life of sex trafficking?
Well, again, you kind of mentioned how they're lured. The traffickers are looking for a specific being, someone who's separated from the pack, alone, downcast eyes, and they begin to befriend them. And they'll take their time with them, or they may, like they have different types of traffickers. You have the guerrilla type of pimp. You have the captain, they call them save a hole kind of pimp, and you also have the corporate who wants them to be a model. So they're all being lured in from different directions. But the one thing that's always going to present is that once they're there, they're going to instill fear. They're going to instill fear.
Mm.
Most times they're forced into, the sex trade. They're forced into stripping. And these individuals, their minds are not, prepared for that. It's not wired for that. I met you this morning and you took me shopping. Now I'm at a hotel and I'm having sex with total strangers. So now the beating start, the starving starts,
Mhm.
denial of food starts, water. There's quotas to be made. You have to come up with $1,500 tonight, and everybody wants, excuse my language, a blowjob, $50. So it's going to be a long night. Okay, so that's how they are definitely introduced. So now you've made your quota. Now you can get a little bit of sleep, or you might get a hamburger. So that goes back into what we'll talk about, kind of like the trauma bond. Like he took care of me, he let me sleep. And so this cycle repeats. This cycle repeats. Another discussion that happens is that, here in Michigan, we're connected to several interstates, 75,
Mm.
94. They're going to get us to Chicago, Toledo. So they're going to get these individuals out of state. And what happens then, you're out of state, you don't know your way around. You don't know how to call for help. You don't know the streets. So, I mean, again, human trafficking has so many moving parts. One case in particular, a young lady was abducted, or lured, I'll say, look, because they don't want to make noise. They don't want to make a lot of noise and draw a lot of attention, so they lure. They kind of have a way to kind of get you without drawing attention. But anyhow, the young lady came up missing and she was killed as a part because she would not comply. So they beat her so badly. Now my product is damaged. I can't do anything with that because they see them as product and commodity. They don't see you as human. They don't see you as, someone's son or someone's daughter or someone's mother or sister. No, they see you as a product. I got to get you out here to make this $1,600 tonight. And now I can't because you're bruised and you're battered. So they will kill you. They killed the young lady. There was another, and just quickly, there was another story where a young woman was accosted, kidnapped, and she went up to a room, and the guy sat downstairs. There was a two-family flat or two-story house. He left the bedroom door open, and at first she was kind of complex, like why did he leave the door open? It was blood all over the floor and blanket. Okay. He knew she wasn't going anywhere. He used that as an example, what happened to the last one. So, I mean,
Mm.
again, I don't mean to be graphic, especially, but this is the reality
Mhm.
of what's
Yeah.
happening, and we can't turn away. When I first watched a movie with Mira Savino and Donna Sutherland about trafficking, and I seen a horrible incident where a child was cast out, well, I can't watch it. And I didn't watch it again. But guess what? It didn't go away.
Mhm.
And all that time I could have watched it and I could have been out here advocating, but I came back. So
Well, I mean, this kind of trauma, what you're talking about is certainly it's not acute, it's complex,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And there's, I mean, specific to human trafficking, I mean, it's serious, complex trauma then the trauma is coming at so many different directions and in so many different ways that, including poly-victimization, which is, you're being traumatized over and over again by different abusers and
Mhm.
different people. And, it makes it there's so many more layers
Mhm.
involved.
Absolutely. And you said something, one other piece, because a lot's going to come to mind, but they sell you off. I mean,
Yeah.
again, it's slavery. It's slavery. So you're going to be bought and you're going to be sold. You're going to be sized up. If you're 12 and you're a virgin, that's a high price. If you're pregnant, they're looking for someone pregnant. That's a good price. They're looking for amputees. I mean, this shows you just how dark
Yeah.
this is. It shows you, just to kind of give you the dark of it. What we're talking about is dark, but it gets darker.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that too, poly-victimization, that there's it's not just your pimp, like they're also being abused and raped on a daily basis, multiple times a day by sex buyers. And we say, oh, well, this is, from the outside looking, someone might say that's consensual sex, she's a sex worker and that's consensual sex between two parties.
Mm.
But when it's a situation of human trafficking, it's not consensual.
No.
She has no other choice because if she doesn't do it, she's either going to get beat or
Mhm.
killed.
Yeah.
Or, um, it's um, on a daily basis, multiple times a day.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and
So,
I like how you used like consent and compliance really quick. There's that difference between consent and compliance, right?
That's
Oftentimes people who are compliant due to the threat of abuse, the threat of beat, and coercion are not consenting to that
no.
act or to that, you know, um, to what they're being asked to do. So there's a difference. I mean, someone might be compliant, but that doesn't mean that they're consenting to it.
They want to stay. They're in survival mode now.
Mhm.
They're in survival mode.
so Felicia,
Speaking of survival mode,
can you get into that a little bit more for us? Like, what is happening in someone's brain, body when all this is happening to them? Like, this survival mode kicks in. Our brain
Mhm.
shifts into survival mode, and um, How does our body respond, or the different?
Well, you know that it's a negotiation, and you want to survive that negotiation because oftentimes they have seen other people be made examples of. They have witnessed murders, they have witnessed severe beatings, their family may be on the line. They may have family information. They may have her baby. They may have her child. So again, I just have to get through this so that I can get to the other side, that my family will be alive, that even I will be alive. Because again, when we talk about like back to the A scores, oftentimes the women that I work with, they have witnessed murders. So that's going to be kind of hard to talk about the depth of what they seen and what they heard. And then, we'll talk about triggers possibly later on. But again, when we talk about survival, you just want to survive the negotiation because that's all it is. It's a it's and that's between the trafficker and the buyer and this commodity. This is the commodity. They don't see you as human. So then we talk about they dissociate. They may come out of their body. They might, that's a coping skill to think that I'm somewhere else, just to get through it. So again, they have been taught many lessons. They have observed many lessons because it's fear. They want to instill that fear. I dare you to run. I dare you to call. And again, someone tell you enough, you see it enough, you're going to survive that situation.
Right. And oftentimes we might respond with like the fight, flight, or freeze. It's like this, just running from the situation as quick as
Yep.
possible, or freezing, just kind of like doing what you can to like maybe not get noticed or to not be able to
Yep.
kind of become paralyzed and unable to move. Or
Exactly.
flight, or fight, you're just gonna throw some fists and try to, do whatever you can.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's like an automatic response, to
Absolutely.
that situation.
And I've seen them in the hospital that tried to take flight, to try to fight. So you're 100%. It's not like one way. It's situational. It's definitely situational, and a person's ability and strength to get through it. Again, you want to survive the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Your brain wants you to survive some. Yeah, you don't even have control over it sometimes. It just kicks in.
Right. That's it. That's it.
Mm-hmm. And that's why when we
Mhm.
talk about triggers, it's so hard to like. Sometimes we'll be like, "Oh, well, I heard that sound, or I got that
Mhm.
feeling, so I want to kick into that survival mode." And when
Absolutely.
you're in recovery, it's like, "No, I'm just sitting here in a meeting. Like I'm not. Nothing's happening." It's it's a crazy, powerful. It's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, our brains make these sort of neuronal connections and wiring. We wire ourselves to respond a certain way. So yeah, you're right, Emily. I love how you made that distinction of what is happening to me right now versus, what happened maybe in the past, and that experience, that trauma, coming back and like causing you to respond with a fight, flight, or freeze, so that you feel like
Absolutely.
you have to go into survival mode. But it's making that sort of distinction as you're recovering, like you're saying, Emily, when you're in recovery, to remember that you bring it to the present, sort of clear that or disconnect that wire and create a new wire in the
Mhm.
brain that says, no, this is where I am now.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
I'm,
So difficult.
I'm sitting here, I'm putting on my jeans, I'm making my bed, I'm not there anymore.
Absolutely.
So because our brains are such an incredible, it's like a constellation, of all these firing connections.
Yeah.
And so it's sometimes clearing out and undoing some of those and kind of having to rewire, so that, because it is like Emily said, you just jump into survival mode and you just respond, fight, flight, freeze.
Absolutely.
And it's sort of trying to now, you got to it's like navigating that. The impact of trauma is so powerful, and it affects our
Mhm.
decisions and behavior,
It
um,
does.
for many, many years, later.
Absolutely.
So some of the signs of, oh, sorry, Emily, did I cut you off?
Well, I was just gonna see it's when like back to ACEs, like if someone has experienced some severe adverse childhood experience, let's say they were sexually abused age of teen and it went on for years and years. I mean, they say that, that affects your development of the brain so much so that, like, by the time you're 25, 26, you're still stuck in like 13-year-old
Absolutely.
mindset.
I agree wholeheartedly with that statement. That is something that I share with my clients is the formative years, the developmental years, that 0 to 3, that 3 to 6, how life is imprinted. Were you nurtured? Were you comfort? Were you safe? Or were you hungry? Were you abandoned? And even before that, the prenatal stage, how was mom stressors? Was mom a victim of abuse? So again, it follows you, from 0 to 3, 3 to 6 into adulthood. And it's quite unfortunate because individuals don't often recognize that. The behaviors are pretty much set. The response is pretty much set. And Emily said something really key, and I've been looking at that, at childhood trauma. At what point of impact did the trauma occur? Because that's oftentimes how people respond. Think about adults having tantrums or throwing
Right.
fits. And then I'll say, who would do that? Think about it. A 7-year-old who cannot self-regulate. They weren't taught to self-regulate. So again, it follows them. And once, just to get to the clinical piece, once they see it, like once they look at it, they go like, wow, now I see. So that again is really a big part of trauma victims. They're kind of stuck in that age. So that behavior is going to present. And you
Thank
see
you
it.
so much. Thank you for expounding on that.
Mhm.
Hannah, do you want to share with us? So what are some of these like physical, emotional, what are some like the signs or other ways that people experience or the way they may react or try to cope with trauma?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's several ways that trauma can manifest itself, and or a combination of different ways. There's, cultural norms and communication styles that may shape the way a person reacts to a traumatic event. The age at which the trauma occurred is, going to affect their responses. But some of the signs physically: low energy, hyper arousal, lethargy,
Yeah.
lack of coordination or balance. Emotionally, you'll see potentially a lot of high anxiety,
Yeah.
anger, depression, fear, avoidance. When you think of behaviorally, substance abuse, alcohol abuse, eating disorders, compulsive behaviors, changes in your relationships, anger-related issues, isolation, and maybe detachment. And then cognitively, could be focus, the inability to concentrate, intrusive thoughts, disassociation. I know Felicia had brought that up as far as survival too, like disassociation, definitely flashbacks.
Yeah.
And so these are some of the signs of trauma. And there's many more. We could do a whole series on, the signs of
Exactly.
trauma. It really does impact so many different areas of our lives. But those are some of the things that, that we see manifested in somebody's life who's experienced serious trauma.
Absolutely.
So on that note, like, so here we are, managing trauma, dealing with all of these things as we work to leave or individuals who've leaving the life. Emily, I know, how does that, how do we do that? Felicia or Emily, how do we do that now? Here we are working to like come out of this space that
Yes.
has become so overwhelming and how do we move
Well, they're
beyond that?
coming down from a adrenaline rush. When we talk about the life, we're talking about fast pace. We're talking about no boundaries. We're talking about, high rates of alcohol, high rates of, just whatever brings the life. The strip clubs are, a part of the life, and, the drug, and that's a part of the life. So what I had was an individual who her life was reflected of that. She said the first time the organization that worked with her, they were able to get her apartment. She said the first time she slept for almost 3 months straight. She
Wow.
just got up, used the restroom, and ate and went back to sleep. She was making up all that time because the
Mhm.
life is fast. It's
Mm.
fast and it's late. And again, there's no rules or boundaries. So now when they're coming back and they're in programs, it's like and rules that could be a barrier because I what do you mean I have to be in at 9? I didn't leave the house until 11. So now we gotta come and hopefully get some compliance, bedtime, again following, house rules. And that's what I'm finding can oftentimes be barriers when we want them to come into treatment or come into a residential shelter. We our arms are open wide, but oftentimes they're not receptive of us, and we can't take that to heart. What we do is model it after domestic violence. It may take a couple of times. They may round out and go back to the life a couple of times before finally they're ready. And you know what we do each time they come back, we treat it like it's the first time,
Mm.
as we would with domestic violence. It's not a "I told you so, I told you not to go back." No, no. It's like,
Mhm.
"Hey," like it never happened, before. Because again, they're coming off a ride, a roller coaster ride, and now everything is coming to a stop, and we have these rules in place, and it's gonna take life skills, it's gonna take, mental health therapy, it's
Mhm.
gonna take consistency, we can't come and go like life before that came and go. They need consistency. So that's just a few,
I
that
mean,
I can think of.
what about trauma bonding? I know that is definitely something that makes it really hard to leave and to move forward.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I can
yeah,
touch on that.
can you?
So, and Felicia mentioned it too, like when you're talking about the relationship between victim, survivor, and their pimp. Um, it's trauma bonding known as Stockholm syndrome. We, remember the story
Yeah,
of Beauty and
yeah,
the Beast. It's when you're in love and have empathy and sympathy for your captor,
yeah,
or in this case, your trafficker or pimp. And it's really that primal defense mechanism to survive. And there are several elements that typically make up a trauma bond. The first is that there's that perceived threat to the victim's life, so that they feel that they are in danger, either their life, someone else's life. There is some threat to danger, and there's definitely that level of fear, as Fletch was saying. And the second element is traffickers show small acts of kindness. So either at the beginning, saying, "I'll give you a place to stay," or
yeah.
"I can offer you this relationship," or "I've got a for you." Um, and I hope, Felicia, you can say more on that too, how it's a cycle, it's an ongoing, there'll be little acts of kindness here and there, like
Absolutely.
that burger at the end of the day, or, just letting
Absolutely.
her get 3 hours of sleep, or
Absolutely, and again, that goes back to Stockholm. Now they're caring, my captor is caring for me, and it
Mhm.
kind of, the feelings toward them flip. So that is another part when they are coming out. They're having sympathy for that person because they're remembering the little nuggets that they
Mhm.
passed out. And that's basically what trauma bonding is. It's just enough to have you come back, and then it's almost like that mouse situation with I forget they're gonna come back. They're definitely gonna come back. So now we are the good guys and we're saying no, 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 but we have to have them to see that,
Mhm,
hey, this is not the only way that you can live. But
mhm.
we've gotta get him
You
as
deserve
out,
it.
right?
Mhm.
But yes, the nuggets, they're dropping nuggets. They're throwing little things at you and you're
Like a
catching it
carrot
and
in
you're
front of
waiting
their
for the
face.
next one, right?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, so there was, the perceived threat to their life or fear.
Mm,
Traffickers show small acts of kindness. Isolation, they would be either isolated, you know, physically from others, or, the trafficker will be holding on to their phone, definitely not around their, the support they used to have, or their family or friends, and perceived ability to, so threat their life or somebody else's life or their children's life, um, is so great that they just don't believe that they have any other choice. There's a learned helplessness.
Yeah.
There's no one to trust, nowhere else to go. And the traffic will often make them think that, hey, like, you've made this choice, and there's a lot of self-blame and shame involved in that too. So, what else is there for me to do? This is what I got myself into. Um, Hannah.
Yeah, they have you buy into that. And just one thing before I forget is
Mhm.
they take your identification. They take away
Yeah.
who you are. Oftentimes they don't have identification to validate who they are. And that's a passports, can and again, you don't know who you are, and you have to, verify that. And they know it, and they know, hey, you break the law, the police are going to get you. They don't have that information, that there are laws, that will protect them. But
Mhm.
again, Stockholm syndrome wise, everything he or she says is truth.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Felicia, you said, they have their documents confiscated. They don't know who they are. But like, when you're in recovery and you're getting treatment and help, like, you really don't know who you are. Like, you have to start from the bottom up. Like, there are so many
Absolutely.
services that these individuals need, like
Yes.
housing, case management. They do need
Yes.
to go get their
Yes.
social security card and birth certificate and like
Yep.
all these documents back. Um,
Absolutely.
housing, food, shelter, the medical care. Who who knows the kind of pain and abuse that they've endured? They've probably definitely at risk for long-term health consequences,
Yes. Yes.
STDs, AIDS,
Absolutely.
um,
Absolutely.
multiple
Absolutely.
abortions.
Yes. Absolutely. And I have what you're mentioning, I've come across individuals who have endured multiple abortions, multiple STDs, pregnancies that were terminated as a result of a beating. At the
Yeah.
time, multiple pregnancies, are aborted as a result or terminated as a result of a beating. However, there are programs that are designed to help individuals get back on their feet, get ID. Now, how they do it, how they connect who this person is without ID. But I think one would be family. Oftentimes they have family. And, we try to reach out to that family, even if they're going to be in a treatment center, we try to reach out to family because most often, a family will care if they're dead or alive, so that kind of helps. But yeah,
Hmm.
there are so many working, and there are so many agencies that want to help.
Yeah.
And we're one of them. We want to help. We have, hey, we're open arms, we're here. And so, there are agencies, there are psychiatrists that are donating their time, and doctors that are donating their time, lawyers that are donating their time, dentists that are donating time, ophthalmologists, for glasses. And, there are so many individuals on this side that are waiting, just waiting for them
Hmm.
to,
Hmm.
to come forth. And I've seen NA, Narcotics Anonymous
Hmm.
groups, and at what is it, the AA. You
Mhm.
know, those groups are available. They utilize those groups in the community, or they come into the setting that they're in to break the addiction.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Mhm. And it takes a village. There's
There
not
it
It
is. Right.
does.
somebody can receive all the care and all those services, and it takes collaboration and partnerships and working together, um, to make that person feel whole again, and that they have a sense of identity and ready to take
Absolutely.
on the new world. Teaching them
Yeah.
job skills, like take skills that
Absolutely.
they learned and transitioning that into, you know, um, some way that they could do that in our world.
Yeah.
Um,
That's and you said there are agents, there are businesses that will team with these programs, and colleges that will team
Yep.
with these programs. So I mean, it's an expectation like, hey, we're waiting for you. It's here.
mm,
You know,
Yeah.
a brand new beginning, a fresh start.
And here's I love this because there are resources out there and people who care and people who love and people who want to support. Now, in order to do that well, some of it is being trauma informed.
Yes.
And I'm gonna just share this link here. How we support a trauma survivor. How do you do that well? And Felicia, I know you've done some incredible work in this, and obviously you're the expert here with that. And you have this awesome diagram that actually is from this website. Is very resourceful. Emily, I know you're just as incredible with this and have so much knowledge and experience. And so it's like the perfect segue into sort of being trauma informed and how do we really love and care for one another in the best way. Can you sort of walk us through that diagram that maybe you could just kind of hold it up just to show, but there's more details and information
Mhm,
on this link
mhm.
that I put here. Yes, it's
Oh,
how to support someone who's experienced trauma.
mhm.
So if you could walk us through some of those things, as we have about 10 minutes left, let's just kind of finish out talking about how we can love on and support and care for.
Okay, first and foremost, we want to be educated on the many aspects of human trafficking. We don't want to come in blind because, again, we are talking about wounded soldiers. We are working with individuals that have been through the worst of the worst. So, first and foremost, we want to take some basic one on one human trafficking. A lot of people don't even believe it exists still, they think it's across the pond. So, I just kind of wanted to put that out there. So again, when we are working with a person who has experienced trauma, we're talking about trauma informed. We want education. We want to welcome them. We want to welcome into a setting that is conducive to healing. Colors are going to matter. Smells are going to matter because we're talking about triggers. How they're greeted is going to matter. How they're talked to is going to matter because there are going to be so many reminders. And here is how we can begin the healing process. First and foremost, when we want to support them, think about the support. They're talking about predictability. Everyone loves surprises, right? Boo. No, not trauma survivors. They often prefer predictability because it feels safer. I want to know what's happening. Okay, because so many things have come out of the dark and came at me. So no predictability. We want some space. Allow time for the survivor to calm down and take perspective. Trauma survivors often have difficulty regulating emotions and take longer to calm down because they've been through the worst of the worst. And we've got to let them know. We got to get them grounded, breathe, smell, look around. Again, Hannah said early on, I've got my pants on, I got this mug of coffee right here. Try to get them to ground and breathe. Sometimes in crisis we forget to breathe, so breathing would be another part of that. Recalibration. Rid over overreacting, oversensitive, over anything from your vocabulary. Like, chill out. It's okay. Stop. You're overreacting. No, just calm down. What do you need? Ask them when in doubt. What do you need? What can I help you do? So you're throwing them a line. Okay, what is it that I can help you do right now? What is it? What do you need? Choice. It can be a big trigger when a survivor is denied choice and control. Confer, collaborate, and cooperate. Let them have choices within reason, nothing crazy, okay? But let them decide, let them determine what's best because we're talking about freedom here. I've gone from being a slave and had to do and go and lay down, get up when they told me. Now you telling me I can't, speak for myself. You remind me of my trafficker. See, there you go. Now you got a problem. So let them make some choices. baby step choices, and then kind of confer with them, to a fault. Like I said, where they're not going to put themselves in danger. Support. Be loving, kind, patient, empathetic, set limits. You have needs too. Sometimes they can be awfully needy because, of course, they don't know boundaries, and they need, because I've gone from having, to live one way in one environment. Now I'm in this environment. So, I mean, again, we as helpers, we have to set limits. I did the thing of giving out my cell phone to one of my clients because I was driving some resources to her home. So I wanted to make sure I could find her. Woo, never again. Okay. Never. I got to get that Google thing, okay, going. But yeah, because it was things that she needed that weren't relevant to helping. So I said, unless you dead, do not call me. All right. So we settled that. Reciprocity. Give what you need. Give what you also need to receive. Listening, empathy, and empowerment. Okay. Again, empower, empower, empowerment. You want to reinforce that. You want to reinforce that again. What do you need? Put it on them. This is about them now. This treatment is about them. What is it that you need? You need medical, dental, you need psychological. Hey, the medicine's not working. I've worked with the lady. They had to do several times for medicine, but you got to vote. You have to verbalize that. So they can work with you again. That's freedom of choice. This isn't working. Can we try something else? And again, I have someone who had a testimonial. It took a while, but they've got my meds right. Attribution. Don't refer to the person's upbringing, problem, issues, behavior. Call it for what it is, trauma. Now that right there, that we could base the treatment on that. Don't talk about the childhood. They'll tell you about their childhood. That's the making of who they are. You don't think they know that? But again, we want to talk about the here and the now. This is what happened to you. It's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. Okay, we could put that up on our wall. It's not what's wrong with you. You've been in and out of jail, you've been in and out of STDs, you didn't had them all. What happened to you? I'm telling you, now you've laid the groundwork for a clinical relationship. And that's I think I've covered them. Oh, perspective. Be aware when the past is intruding into the present. Don't take responsibility for what's not yours. I mean, again, the past is going to crop up, flashback, intrusive thought. But again, we want to manage that through our coping abilities because we're going to build some virtual toolbox. We're going to breathe. We're going to ground ourselves. We're going to light candles and have aroma scents. We're going to do whatever it takes just to get through that moment, through that trigger. So, and this is a wonderful assessment tool. And, oftentimes you don't have to be a victim. Sometimes you're just having a stressful day. You can use it too.
I'm so glad you said that because I was just thinking like, even if it's not necessarily like the professional clinical in a clinical setting, but it could just be your friend, your neighbor, your sister, your brother, somebody who's experienced trauma and they're struggling right now. It's like, okay, just as a friend, these are some of the tools that the way in which to respond and not put people on the defense and not, blame
Absolutely.
and not, it's just showing love and coming in with this groundwork or this grounding, this ability to kind of be aware, like, oh, let me just light a candle. Maybe we need to chew some gum. Like
Yeah.
and what happened to you versus, what'd you do now?
Right.
I'm freaking out again. What you do
Exactly.
now? It's just
Exactly.
that approach that makes sort of that world of difference. If you're always just thinking about how can I make sure that person feels loved, even though maybe their reaction was, mean to me, or maybe, it's just turning it around a little bit and thinking twice, like, that person may have experienced some trauma or right now is being triggered or is experiencing whatever. Let me approach this with a different way, So,
Absolutely.
wow, this was such a great conversation.
Yes.
I've learned so much. I actually like sitting here taking all these notes. We just appreciate you guys and appreciate this awesome platform, the ability to kind of share and to kind of have dialogue about some of these very important topics.
Absolutely.
So in closing, I just want to say, if you can share a cup of hope today, please do so. And just want to thank you, Emily and Felicia, and everyone who was attending and listening in today. Just want to say thank you for being a part of Cup of Hope, and go out and talk about what you've learned today and the things,
Yes.
and go and have some conversation, outside of here, wherever and however and whatever you're able to do that. Thank you so much, you guys, and we are looking forward to next month.
Thank you. Thank you.
Felicia.
Take care. All right.